Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Apex Racing TV's coverage of a new series here on Apex, the Sunset Cruise. I'm your host, Ron Mullins, joined by Avery McDonald in the commentary booth, with Joshua Wilkie working all the cameras in the virtual production hauler. Now, as I said, there's a new series. Hopefully it'll be a fixture, fingers crossed. Hopefully we put on a good broadcast and show these people what Apex can do. So, as I said, new series, but it's definitely a very old school combination here. We're running at Road America, one of my personal favorite tracks in all of America, and I guarantee that opinion is shared with a lot of drivers, not only on iRacing, but also a lot of the drivers that we'll see in the field tonight. And we're also running in the Porsche GT3, the 992. I usually get confused by the Porsche 911 range, but we're running in the 992 here tonight for the racing action here. 40 minutes. A 40-minute race ahead of us, and I believe we're about to load into qualifying here soon. So we've got a lot of racing action in store. Fingers crossed it's some good racing action. This track always lends itself to some good battling. It has those long straightaways that lend itself well to some pretty good slipstream past each other. And with these cars, which are a little bit on the bigger side, it's not like the small little tiny cars like the Indy cars or something like that run here every year. These cars are fairly large, so I think we'll see a lot of drivers slipstreaming past each other. We'll just have to wait and see what happens here throughout tonight's broadcast. So Avery, I'll pass it off to you, and welcome to Sunset Cruise, and I'll ask you real quick, what are your thoughts heading into tonight's race?
Well, my thoughts going into tonight's race, you know, I was driving this track earlier with the Porsche at Road America, and I tell you, there's a lot of good passing opportunities, big passing opportunities. Turn 1, turn 5, and then Canada corner, which is turn 12. So this track has plenty of passing opportunities, Ron, so don't expect to follow the leader kind of race here tonight. Expect some good passing.
Oh, fingers crossed. I think, I mean, you outlined some very good overtaking opportunities there, so I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think we're going to see a lot of drivers trying to go for moves, and there's a lot to play here with the series. We're 5 rounds in, so it's only a 6-race season that these drivers have to negotiate with, so we don't have much long left with the series until a series champion is crowned. So I'm sure these drivers, seeing the end of the season approach in their windshields, I think these drivers might try and bang and rough each other up a little bit and try and push these virtual Porsche 911s to their absolute limit here tonight. So as I said, currently in qualifying, we're currently following Curtis Cromwell Crummel, my apologies, heading into turn 1, the heaviest braking zone on this track. It's very difficult to try and get the car woed up, trying to avoid the gravel trap and slide it through turn 1. Then heading into turn 3 here, another very tricky corner. This has always caught out some drivers in real life, so hopefully, fingers crossed, the drivers can get through lap 1 here clean. So we're very early into this qualifying session right now. I don't believe anyone has set a lap time on the board. 10-minute qualifying, and then we'll be heading into a 40-minute race. So there's still a lot that we have to keep our eyes on in this race. So now what I'll do is I'll explain the name. So some of you may be saying Sunset Cruise, that's a pretty odd name for a racing series. Well, considering the prize that's on offer, it's a very fitting name. So at the end of this year, a driver will be selected at random to win a cruise. I believe it's a 7-day cruise to Mexico. So it's a big prize. It doesn't really depend on your position. It's just any of these drivers. They're racing for fun here. They're racing for a good time, which, considering how it's a winter here in the United States, the temperatures are plummeting, and the colorful leaves that we always get graced with in fall have now fallen away, are now stuck in all of our gutters. It's nice to get some virtual action racing-wise. So, as I said, we are in qualifying now, and I think we'll see some of these drivers post their first lap times on the board here soon.
Yeah, you get 3 opportunities to get, you got 3 qualifying laps in 10 minutes, so you really don't have time to make a mistake or, go off track. So if you're new to iRacing, if you go off the track on the grass, you get a 1X, that's going to eliminate your time since we're in the qualifying session. We really thank everybody for tuning in today. So you take a look at Curtis here. This is what I think, Ron, is the most important turn of the track, turn 14, because if you screw up turn 14, you got this long straightaway and this ginormous hill to get going. So you see Rodney Campbell so far is the fastest driver. He's sitting in a really good time. Still room to get faster, but a lot of times are put in 36 so far of 57 cars that will be on the grid.
Yeah, 57 cars. May God have mercy on our producer Josh's computer. His CPU is going to be feeling the burn after tonight's broadcast. I'm sure mine and Avery's computers are basically going to be on fire. I'm probably going to be falling asleep after this broadcast because I've been battling some kind of ailment ever since the start of yesterday. So I'm going to probably have to crack open a window and pray to God that I don't hear any sort of gunshots. It being Philadelphia, where I'm from, that is very likely going to happen. So right now, Campbell setting a very good time right now, about 2/10 ahead of the 771 of Gregorado that we're following here, coming through the very tight and twisty middle section of the circuit, about to enter the carousel and go through another very important corner on this track. It's a corner where if you get it wrong, especially in real life, you are done for and probably going to take a one-way trip to the barrier. But in the sim, it's not too comforting either, especially with these new reworked gravel physics on iRacing. You just touch that gravel a little bit and it basically feels like you hit a wall. So that's a very tricky corner. It's going to be one that we might see some mistakes on throughout the race and probably through qualifying as well. But it's a corner that these drivers absolutely have to nail to get a great run coming into the kink and then going through the kink and then going through the not so straight flat out blast heading into Canada Corner, which is probably going to be one of the prime overtaking opportunities, the hardest braking zone on this circuit. It's a very tight corner. Turn 1 is an equally heavy braking zone, but it's a little bit more open there, so you can't really shove it down the inside as much as you can do in Canada Corner. So we'll just see where these drivers try and migrate to try and get some passes done here in this race. So we're about halfway through qualifying now, and we're going to see if Gregado can set in a good time. As about 2/10 slower, and it actually does not improve on his time there, so he's going to remain in P2 for now. We got, actually, I say that, Chad Dick, Apex Racing TV alum Chad Dick, goes in with a pretty good time to move himself into P2 there with a 204.681. So the only person really close to Campbell right now setting a fantastic time, about a 10th and a half ahead of Chad currently. So I think, fingers crossed, we'll have these drivers close up a little bit. And there's another Apex Racing TV alum, my good buddy JR Gregory, who I do the Radical broadcast with. And JR, I hope you're watching this, because we kind of had this deal fleshed out after the Radical broadcast at Canadian Tire last Friday, and I'll say it again here publicly, JR, if you make any sort of mistakes, we will catch it on camera, because your fellow buddy Joshua Wilkie that works on the Radicals with us too as well is working on the cameras, so we will bully you mercilessly if there's any sort of incident. So knowing my luck, I'll probably get that clip, and our producer Josh said that we will not miss it. So JR, you have been warned, so keep it clean, keep it in between the white lines, otherwise you will be roasted mercilessly. Definitely on this broadcast, and maybe tomorrow once we line up for the Radical season finale at the Nordschleife. Speaking of which, if you want to tune into any of the other racing action that we have here on Apex Racing TV, we have a whole bunch of it. We've got the Rickmatech series, the Rickmatech sports car series. I'll be running at Watkins Glen on Monday. That'll be a pretty good race, probably quite hectic as well. And then we also have the Radical season finale that will be coming up on Friday. That will be at the Nordschleife, so that's going to be a pretty fantastic race as far as I'm concerned. So we're in qualifying now. JR currently lined up in 32nd position there, which 32nd usually wouldn't be the best result in the world, but considering this is a 56 car field, that's pretty middle of the road. So it's kind of ridiculous having a massive field. What do you think here, Avery? Is your CPU feeling the pain already?
Oh, CPU's feeling no pain. We're stout today, just like Rodney Campbell's time. Very stout, a little bit quicker than, like you said, Chad Dick. One thing I want to point out, from first to 33rd, it's only 2 seconds. So, I mean, that is a lot on the track, but how big this track is, it goes to show how close this field is. So that's one thing I've noticed is how some of the times are. But the drivers got their 3 laps in. We got about a minute left to qualifying, so we'll just wait and see if anybody else on the track to get some times in. But like you said, Ron, really good track here. One of my favorite tracks. I mean, for the road racing, it'd be in my top 3. But the one thing I want to point out, I did the Super Formula broadcast not too long ago here at Road America, and Canada Corner was a corner where we've seen a lot of overtaking attempts, but the overtaking car wasn't always able to maintain it because they would push off the track because they went a little too hard and pushed off. So I'm really curious to see how these Porsche cars are going to handle this whole track here at Road America once we get in traffic.
I gotta imagine that when the lap traffic comes around, it is going to get hectic regardless of where they catch it at. This track, as I mentioned in my intro, is fairly old school, all things considered. It's a national park of speed here in the US, and it is very narrow in its nature. The track layout has not changed in the many years that this track has been operational, and it really hasn't been improved too much. I mean, I say you can't really improve this track because it's already damn near perfect as far as I'm concerned, but has been widened too much. It's only been repaved a few times, and there's not a whole lot of asphalt runoff to speak of, especially at this layout. So the drivers are lining up behind the Porsche safety cars, a massive field of 57 Porsches, 56 of them being race cars, one of them being the pace car, and I don't think we'll have a whole lot of time to get through the starting grid, because I think we'll have a very abridged lap here before we catch the green flag. So it's going to be Rodney Campbell lining up on the pole position. Chad Dick will join him on the front row. That's Enrico Gregorato rounding out your podium places in P3. Then it's Jokel in P4. Then it's Chris Brown in P5. Elbaga in P6. Chapman in 7th. Glenn in 8th. Baker in 9th position. That's... oh boy, I feel like I'm going to butcher that pronunciation. We're just going to skip through and go through the rest of the field there. It's... Patrick Adams-Skorinsky, I believe. If I butcher that pronunciation, I apologize in advance. And then it's Mike Watson in P13, and then Mike Patterson. So we got an all-Mike row 7. They line up in P13 and 14 respectively. That's Finch in 15th, Huth in P16, Derrickson in 17th, my apologies. That's Ben Lung in 18th, John Gibson in the 19th position, Brett Holmes in P20, and then you can go through the rest of the top 20 here. The drivers are lining up here. Binkley in P21, Rondow in P22, Jokel in P23, Tong in P24. So there's page 2. Here's page 3. Eddie in P25, Ferrer in P26, Fricky in P27. That's Eskridge in 28th, Crummel in 29th, Neville in 30th, rounding out your top 30. Then Lacrome, Elsom and then Saxon 34th, so you can go through the rest of the field here. We don't have enough time. The Porsche pace car has made that hard right turn going down pit road. You can see the rest of the drivers beginning to work their way towards the starter. Barry is going to throw the iRacing green here soon. We're going to take a look at the starter there. The green flag is out. The lights are off. The green flag is waving, and we're underway here for the Sunset Cruise race here, race number 5 of the season at Road America. It's a fairly even keel start with our front runners there. They're going to have a drag race here. It's going to be a battle of the last late breakers coming into turn 1. And it's going to be really close. It's a number 62 getting ahead there. Meanwhile, farther behind, a lot of drivers going side by side and trying to shuffle their way through the field, but so far it's been a fairly clean start there. A lot of drivers making it through turn 1 smoothly, but there's still plenty of corners for these drivers to negotiate before they round off lap 1.
Yeah, a couple drivers went off. You see there in turn 3, that looks like it's Baker in the 330 able to get back going. And a relatively clean start, but there goes, was that JR? I don't know. It wasn't JR. It looked like a white car. It's a 228, it looks like.
I'm taking a look at my live timing screen. Not sure who that was. Meanwhile, up towards the front, the number 62 there of Rodney Campbell, who took the pole position, is pulling away right now about half a second between him and Chad Dick right behind him. Meanwhile, it was a fairly bad start there for our third place starter of Gregato, who has now dropped down to P6, and not a very good start for him. Meanwhile, Dean Chapham has had a fantastic start. He is currently running in P4, up 3 positions so far. Just looking through the rest of the field, Brett Holmes has moved up 7 spots. Charlie Furr has moved up 9. So we have a lot of drivers making their way through the field right now. Meanwhile, Tamber Elbaga has had a terrible start. He's down 18 positions currently, and some more drivers having fairly ho-hung starts currently, down 25 positions, 24 positions. Lots of drivers having some pretty bad starts. Apex Racing TV alum J.R. Gregory up 1 position, currently running in P34. So far, so clean. Only a few incidents farther down the order. It was Jason Finch, who I believe is currently in the pits. He is currently your last place runner in 57th position, and I'm just looking through trying to find who's involved in that incident. I believe it was a 278 there, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to go through and figure out who that was. We might be able to take a look at a replay here in the not too distant future to see who exactly was involved in that incident. But so far, besides a few incidents here and there, it's been fairly clean. Actually, I say that, I believe we might have just had a oh boy, my vocal cords are already killing me. We've got some replays to look at here involving some drivers. This is the first one here. Mungia here having an off. And for some reason, I cannot see it on my screen currently. So hopefully,
yeah, it looks like he just was coming in the corner, was able to... the drivers in front of him broke a little early there, and it just caused him to lock him up and spin around. But we move on, and you take a look at Chad Dick, though. I tell you what, man, had a really good start. Yeah, started second, and is still in Rodney Campbell's in his mirror, so that's always important. Top 5 is starting to break away a little bit from Gregato in 6th. So take a look at, there's Kevin in that 25 running that Porsche, and it's just you got to be really picture perfect here, Ron, because every time you make a mistake here, it usually leads on to a little bit of a stretch to where you need to have a good pace, and that's what I love about Road America. You can get fast speeds, but if you make that mistake, you're really going to struggle.
I think you hit the nail right on the head there, because one thing about this track is one mistake can snowball, especially in the very tight, twisty section in the middle part of this circuit. If you make one mistake and go a little bit wide coming through one corner, you sacrifice your run, you get dirt on your tires, and you are done for mentally. This track is really one where you have to be confident in your car and confident in yourself as a driver behind the wheel of that car. So you really have to... Mind games can play a massive role in some of these races. So right now, Chad Dick, actually, the gap is spread out a little bit between him and Campbell. It's still about 1.1 seconds, though, so it's fairly close, all things considered. But I think those mind games of just having that car fill up your rearview mirror can play a pretty big role in how these races turn out. Meanwhile, farther behind, we've got some action involving the number 379 here of Crayson. My apologies if I butchered that pronunciation. He's a fellow Pennsylvanian, so I feel bad if I do that. But he's currently in the midst of a Porsche sandwich here with the other 982 there of Road Heaver. Trying to look for a move there coming into the final corner, was not close enough. And meanwhile, Lidback right ahead is kind of checking him up. It's a Porsche sandwich here. We'll see what happens coming into turn 2. Meanwhile, I believe Tong has actually come into the pits. I'm not sure if that's some kind of disconnect or a very early pit stop. I believe these drivers will have to deal with a pit stop at some point. Yeah, you can see there's Tong there in his pit box and is pulling out right now. So that could be a master stroke strategy, just trying to pit very early on, or it could be some kind of damage that they're trying to repair. Who knows? So, oh boy, that's contact there in the small little stretch between turns 1 and 3, and Chad there in the number 379 has massive contact with the wall. That Porsche is destroyed. Both of those drivers, I think, will be at the race. If not, they'll both have massive damage to their Porsches, so it's a tough way for both of their races, and they're having a pretty good battle there a little bit farther down in the order, but sadly for them, their races come to an end fairly early on.
Yeah, just some hard racing there. It's really tough to get around here sometimes. But they do have the one fast repair, and after 17 incidents, there'll be a drive-through. And then once you hit 25, you'll be DQ'd. So
that will be something to keep our minds on, because I think even though there isn't a whole lot of asphalt runoff to speak of, I think some of these drivers might get I think they might teeter on those incident limits. And I think with the argy-bargy racing that we've seen so far, that could certainly ring true. We'll just see if any drivers pick up any penalties by the end of this race. There's still plenty to play for. We're only 6 minutes in to this 40-minute affair here with the Sunset Cruise. And I forgot to mention this in the intro, the cruise won't be possible if it weren't for Princess Cruises, who sponsored this series very kindly. They are a wonderful company that is a proud partner of this series, and they began cruises back in 1965. So I'm trying to do the math here. I was
58, maybe 58 years ago.
58 years ago. So let me do them. I was about I was minus 40 when the series when the company started cruises to Mexico, and they've grown to become one of the biggest premier cruise lines in the world. So they have a massive fleet carrying millions of passengers every single year, and they're the proud partner of the series. And one of these lucky drivers that you see on screen will get an opportunity to be on a cruise. I've never been on a cruise myself, but I'm sure visiting a country like Mexico, which even though it has a bad rap for crime, is a very beautiful country to visit. So I'm sure these drivers will definitely be trying to battle hard, not only for positions to get a good result in not only this race but in the championship, but they'll also try and just be in the series, and fingers crossed that they get the good luck of the draw to be the lucky recipient of that cruise in a few weeks' time. So the series also won't be possible if it weren't for the Porsche Club of America. They're the organizers of this series, and of course, Porsches, they're some of the best and one of the most popular brands of sports cars in this country. I see many of them at many autocross events that I've gone to with the SDCA over the years. I know here on the East Coast, at least here in the other Northeast, running out of the Philadelphia region, we had the Reason Toter Porsche Club run for many years with the SDCA. So the Porsche Club is always good. My buddy Robbie Campbell actually has a Porsche 944 that I know he's very proud of. I think his father's more proud because he drives that car more than he does, but Porsche is a wonderful car. I always used to pull for Porsche when they were running in LMP1, then moving on to the GT categories, and now that they're back in the top class of prototype racing, I always root for Porsche as much as I root for Cadillac, being a cold-blooded American. But right now it's all Porsche field here, and right now the master of the Porsche currently is Rodney Campbell, who is pulled away right now. Currently the gap between him and Chad Dick right behind is a little north of a second and a half, and he's actually fallen into the crutches of Braun right behind. That gap is pretty close, about a half a second separating those two, so we might see some archie-bargy action. We might see Braun try and go for a move and climb his way up into P2, and I think I noticed a little bit farther ahead there could be lap traffic involved in this fight very early on. Lap traffic is dealing with this fight, so I think that could be something that these drivers have to have to keep in mind if they try and fight here.
Yeah, Jason Finch, he's a driver lap down, had some unfortunate in the start. As you see, the closing speed is starting to close up pretty good, and kind of waiting. You're really hoping if you're the lap. I'm always lap down, Ron. Like That's kind of my how I race on iRacing. I'm always way slower than anybody on here. I just really hope they can pass me on a straightaway, just to make it easier. So we'll have to just wait and see when Campbell will get up to him. He might be able to catch him here. Still pretty big gap, but this is such a long straightaway. But if he doesn't get him in here, there's just a couple corners till you get to the next straightaway. It's kind of what I feel like at Road America. There's always that next straightaway coming up, just a couple corners. But Rodney just putting on a really good run. The Canadian sitting on top, started first, still led every lap, and he's about 0.3 of a second faster than Chad. So it's always good to see a bunch of different people from different countries out here racing. We just have the Americans and Canadians here, but you take a look at a lot of the Apex Racing leagues on Apex Racing TV. We have a broad range, but really good job by Campbell. Chad Dick is starting to fall back, you said, to Chris Braun, and Chris just keeps putting some good corners in. He can catch up to him. He doesn't need to pass him right away. We're only a quarter of the way through this race, Ron. So here's the best times on your timing and scoring. That's on the left side of your screen. Just some really good times so far. But the fastest guy is, if I'm not mistaken, is still Campbell.
Actually, I believe Braun was actually faster there. You can see a 205.246, so a little bit faster than Campbell's 0.291. So still pretty close between those two. It's just a marginal gap at a track this long. That small little gap in time is basically inches, so it's pretty close between those two. So I don't think Braun currently has that pace advantage to catch up to Campbell, but we do have some more action to contend with. Might see some pit stops later on. There's still a lot of racing action ahead of us. Meanwhile, we're seeing the continued fall down of our third place starter, Gregorato, who is falling now, getting overtaken by Jokel, moving down into P6. But actually, this fight is not over yet, as he's looking for a move around the outside. This is going to be bold here and actually gets a move done fairly uncontestedly. So Gregorato in the number 771 there moves up into P5 once again, so continuing to hold on to that top 5 position, but only barely. But I think the battle that we have to keep our eyes on is definitely going to be that fight between Braun and Dick, because I think that is pretty close, all things considered. Braun was definitely a lot quicker that time around. Oh, this is gonna be a big hit for Albano there. It's a massive pileup coming out of the King. It's a smoke screen effect, so this is gonna be close here. Oh, this is gonna be massive. Oh my god, that's a Porsche doing some Tokyo drifting coming through the grass. I think he managed to keep that going in a straight line. God bless America, he did. Meanwhile, farther behind, oh my god, that's 3 cars piling into each other, and hopefully no one else gets caught up in this. Hopefully Neville doesn't back out. Okay, he toes back to the pits, I believe. So, oh boy, that was a dramatic series of events there. I'm not sure who it was that went into the grass, probably north of 150 miles an hour, had a massive moment of tail-out action, but managed to keep it going. I'm not sure who that was, but they get the star medal. Meanwhile, farther behind, there's another Porsche getting spun into the outside wall coming out of the final corner. There's a bit of a shuffle there. I believe the red and white car there, I'm trying to get the number off of that. I believe that's in 290 there, of Lung, was trying to pull into the pits and was very slow coming out of the final corner, and that caused a bit of a stack up. I believe the driver that hit the wall was actually doing a little bit of lawn mowing to try to avoid that. We might get some replays to see the dramatic series of events that have just unfolded here in the past few moments. This is the incident coming out of the final corner involving Eddie. We're following him, and ooh, it's going to be very close there, and yeah, just gets spun towards the outside wall. The other driver there that spun and was trying to pull into the pits, and rather than just hitting the brakes, they decided to turn there, and that's... Ooh, I'll put on my race steward hat there and say that that incident would be reviewed a lot more, but I'm not officiating the series. I'm just calling it, so I'll just say what I think, and I think that was a completely unnecessary incident. But unfortunately, it did happen, and unfortunately for those drivers that were involved in those many incidents that happened within about a 30-second window there, they're all their races have been permanently damaged. It's such a shame. Ooh, and this is another replay here of the Eddie incident, and just, oh yeah, it's, I'm I think I said everything I need to say about that. And meanwhile, there's the incident involving Albano. I think this will be the early crash there. This is Neville, who was very late on scene. There were about 5 accidents here coming through this corner. Got a little bit squirrely there, hit a little bit of the curb there, and sadly for him, it played havoc to his race, and then rejoins and gets clipped by 2 other Porsches. Good evasive action from the Porsche right behind to check up and manage to avoid that accident. Meanwhile, the other drivers involved had a pretty bad and toward time there. So such a shame for a lot of these drivers that got taken out very early on, and one of them was actually our old buddy J.R. Gregory, who was the other driver spinning hard into the outside wall on the opening lap. So it's I think it might be a little bit late to take a look at a replay there, but I think that wasn't really his fault, so we won't poke fun at him too badly there. But meanwhile, we've got drivers pulling into the pits very early on. Do you think, I'll pass this off to you, Avery, do you think this is a strategic decision from these drivers, or do you think they're just trying to repair some damage?
I think they're taking their one quick fix. I mean, yeah, this early in the race, you're either taking a quick fix or you're on the track. So they'll come in, get that damage repair. If you're new to iRacing, the quick fix. Oh well, here's a good battle coming out of there. You get one quick fix in this room, and means your car gets back to the way it was when it started. But there's Derek Dirksen off the track a little bit, but he gets back going. 17th place, still in a good spot. 3 seconds back of Binkley in 16th. Take a look at a replay of it. In the trying to make an overtake and just went a little bit too hard, and what happened was he didn't necessarily park the car, but slowed down dramatically just because he didn't make the corner quite right. But we move on. Not always about he's gonna save it. Come on, Tokyo. Oh, under the wall. But it's okay. You'll just have to get back going and back to the leaders though. Rodney Campbell is pulling away from Chad Dick, but you see on the timing tower, Ron, look at Chris Braun. He's starting to catch up to him. It's only half a second.
Yeah, I think that gap has actually stagnated. I think it has closed up just a teeny tiny bit. I'll take a look at my live timing screen to see what kind of lap times they did last time around, but I think it was pretty close there because that gap has been teetering around the half-second barrier for quite a long ways now. And taking a look at the last laps here, and Braun was just a little bit quicker. Braun said a 2:05.6. Meanwhile, Chad Dick was at a 2:05.7. So just a little bit. It was actually a little over a tenth of a second. My apologies, it was actually a little under a tenth of a second there, separating them in lap time, but still just slowly closing in that gap there. And I think the gap is actually closed up between Campbell and Dick, as Campbell is trying to deal with some lap traffic here. This is going to be detrimental to his race. Actually, I say that he has a fairly large gap, all things considered. I say large. It's only 2 seconds, but it's fairly comfortable, you could say. So I think Campbell right now is feeling the burn of the lap traffic, holding him up quite badly. So hopefully he can negotiate. Hopefully for his sake, at least, he can negotiate those. Hopefully for our sake, as broadcasters, he can get held up a little bit. So we might have a battle for the lead here. Campbell getting held up massively, coming through the carousel, doing a little bit of lawn mowing on exits. That dirty air is affecting him badly, but he's also getting the adverse effect here. Going down the straightaway, he's building that gap between himself and Dick. Going down this very long straightaway, about to enter Canada corner. Is the car going to yield? Yes, he does. Campbell goes to the outside and gets a move done. So helped him a little bit with the slipstream, but also hurt him a little bit with the dirty air.
Yeah, when you know you're faster though by 0.3 of a second over the drivers in front of you, it's okay to be patient because you can lose a lot more than what you can gain. So good move by Rodney Campbell. The gap shrunk just a little bit, but I think he'll be okay because he just shows a lot of pace, and especially with Chad Dick and Chris Braun starting to close up, and he's just hoping those guys start battling, because the more they battle, the bigger the gap between the second and first will be. So just Chris Braun isn't quite there yet to make a move. He's just able to keep the pressure on him, and that's really all you can do right now. And halfway through this race is you keep the pressure, but side by side, 3 wide here for 21st in contact. That's Patrick Gill and that went off a little bit, but they're able to keep going. The 101 of Russell we're on board with, or not on board, taking a look at. Oh, and then Patrick Gill goes off the track and wheel hops a little bit, but they're still racing together.
Yeah, that was some very hair-raising stuff. Not really a track that you want to go off track at. Well, you don't want to go off. Don't want to go off track at any track, but at a track like this, you definitely don't want to go off track. I said track probably about 18 times in the span of about 18 seconds there. That's a record for me, but that was some very hair-raising stuff between all three of those drivers. Some close racing, some being and banging and roughing each other up, and also some rally action going off the course. So thankfully, all of them keep going. I believe I'm not sure, I believe it was Gill, if I'm not mistaken, that pulled in to take their fast repair. Actually, it's Elbaga, who I think was the other one that was the receiving end of the little bit of contact there. Actually, no, it was Baker. My apologies. That was a driver that went off coming into the pits. So they probably took their fast repair and have rejoined the track, currently running in P34. So right now, a fairly spread out field, all things considered. Right now, currently the gap between Campbell and Dick has actually decreased a little bit. It's fairly it's a little bit closer there. Meanwhile, this battle right towards the tail end of the top 10 involving Patterson, Fair, and Lung has heated up quite nicely. Lung was, of course, involved in that very hair-raising moment quite a few laps ago coming out of the final corner, so he's managed to recover nicely and is currently involved in this fight. Meanwhile, Braun has pulled into the pits, so I think the strategy has popped up now. Meanwhile, we've got Chad Dix negotiating some lap traffic here, trying to get these cars disposed of and trying to fight Campbell up ahead, who I believe might get held up here in turn 1 by a lapped car, so we might have to take a look at that. Meanwhile, you can see Chris Braun taking that slow trip down pit road. It is so irritating having to drive down such a long pit road here. So Braun is slowly chugging his way down the pit road to finally pull in his pit box now. So the strategy is playing a little bit of a role. It probably won't be too long until we see the leaders come in too.
Yeah, you got to be careful when you're coming into pit. You can gain so much time on how you enter pit road, but you can also lose a lot if you speed. So good pit stop there by Chris Braun. Going to come out of the pits, sitting in 17th position, make it 18th. So, but he's got really good pace, and I think he'll be able to make some passes here. You got to just keep in mind, you got to push it, but you just got to be a little cautious because you never know what the other driver is thinking. But I think Chris Braun, who's going to have a good run and out of 3 here, and he might be able to make it overtake into 5.
And we'll see here the slipstream is such a big part of these Porsches with that massive rear wing on the back, but you can see Braun trying to get the move done, eyeing up the outside, and actually gets a move done well before they go onto the brakes here coming into 5 and closes up massively on the car, stacks up ahead. So Braun right now is a man on a mission. We have to see what kind of strategy is going to play a good role for these drivers. Are they going to try and prefer the undercut? Are they going to try and do the overcut? What is going to be the strategy of choice here? I think right now the pace that we've seen hasn't been a very long time, but the small little amount of pace that we've seen from the drivers that have exited the pits has been fairly mighty. So I think we might see some drivers try and pit a little bit early. We'll see how some of the leaders respond here. We're following Dean Chapman coming through the final series of corners, a little bit farther behind than Campbell and Dick, who I don't believe have come into the pits. Will Chapman take the call? Yes, he does. So he pulls into the pits from the 3rd position. So he is going to try and gamble on a fresh set of tires with about 23 minutes into this race. So we're past a halfway mark now. Only 17 minutes left to go. So these drivers coming into the pits and shuffling up the strategy. We'll see what Campbell and Dick do. I think if it were me, if I were them, I would probably pull in and just respond to the drivers that have pitted behind. What do you think you would do, Avery, if you were in their spot? Would you pit now or to try and stretch it out a little bit?
I think if you're Rodney Campbell, you stretch it out. I don't think he wants to be dealing with dirty air at all. He likes having that clean track. I think you stretch it out until you're confident that you can come in the pits and come out with clean air. It's super important, as we've seen. He did lose a little bit of time, but the gap has grown to almost 3 seconds over him and Chad Dix. So he's got a lot of pace. But if I'm Rodney, I'm going to run the stretch.
I think that's. I mean, there's pros and cons to both sides because I think being in a nice groove, because pulling into the pits and having to trundle down on the pit speed limiter for so long, it feels like for I think it's about 50 seconds these drivers will lose by pitting. It's a fairly long time, so I think just kind of pitting in it not only puts you back in the dirty air there because of course the amount of drivers behind him, Campbell will definitely be in dirty air upon pit exit regardless of when he comes into the pits, but it also breaks up your momentum. You're like feeling in a groove, you're like, yeah, I can do this, I can do that, and then you come into the pits and you have to wait for a while, then stop, and then change all your tires. It breaks up your groove a little bit. You get into a bad vibe, and then of course exiting the pits on those fairly cold and new tires is of course when mistakes are prone to happen, especially in dirty air. So I can't really blame Campbell if he tries to stretch it out a little bit, but he's gonna have to pit soon here, so we'll see when exactly he pulls in. Chad Dick, the gap between those two has spread out a little bit. Dick hasn't really had the best pace in the world as of late, and actually I say that I believe Campbell, yes he has. Campbell has now come into the pit lane, so he has now vacated that lead to Dick, who stays out this time around. And meanwhile, we've got drivers farther behind pulling in, so we'll keep our eyes here on Braun to see what he does. It was 13.1 seconds stationary there. Actually 7.4 for Tong. Wow, I think that was a very early pit stop, so I think that could be the reason why. We'll have to keep an eye on that gap. Braun coming through the final series of corners, so we'll see what happens. I think I don't know. I think we might have to take a look at the live timing screen and see what kind of lap times Braun is doing, because I think if he plays his cards right, I think he could be in a good shot of retaking the lead.
Yeah, we'll have to just see, Braun. Nope, Campbell. There it is. There he is. There's Braun. It's about 2 seconds.
That is very close there. I'm going to take a look at my live timing screen to see what kind of laps Braun has done so far. Yeah, just taking a look right now, going through. And Braun actually set the, I believe, the fastest lap of the race there. Yeah, a 205.17. So those new tires are working very well on the number 610 Porsche of Braun there. So I'm sure right now he is feeling a little bit racy. This is the time to strike. You have to strike while the iron is hot. And while Campbell's on those new tires, trying to get them up to temperature and trying to scrape all the solvents off them on this lap, I think Braun, what he needs to do is just push, push, push. He needs to close up that gap, try and apply a little bit of pressure to Campbell. And with those newer tires, this is the perfect time to make a mistake. So I'm sure Braun right now, he's going to have to push you. We're riding on board with him. And he is pushing that Porsche of his to the absolute limit. But despite that, I believe the gap is increasing a little bit between him and Campbell right now. So Braun, he's going to have to strike right now. If he doesn't, he is probably going to be, it's not going to be a very easy way for him to take the win in tonight's race. But I'm sure Chad Dick, currently running in P1, about 8 seconds ahead right now. Yeah, I was about to say that he has to respond, and he has. So Chad Dick is going to pull into the pits, giving the lead to Gregorado there in P2. So it won't be too long until all the drivers up ahead finally pull in, and then the lead, or the battle that we're seeing right now, which is currently for P5, will become the battle for the lead here. I believe we have another lap car involved, and yep, take a look at the left-hand side of your screen. I was about to say, taking a look at the left-hand side of your screen, all four of the drivers up ahead of these two have now pulled into the pits, and now this is a battle that you're seeing not only for the proxy lead of the race. In a short few moments' time, it will be the battle for the lead here. So I gotta see what kind of where Chad Dick might exit out on track. I think he'll probably lose a position there to Braun here. We're going to see they're going to rejoin the pits here soon, and yeah, it's going to be no contest between Chad Dick there and Campbell. You can see, yeah, Dick exiting fairly far behind these two, so Chad Dick is now just going to try and hold on to that podium for as long as he can. This now has turned into a two-car race between Campbell and Braun.
Yeah, and Chad is about where I think he would have been if they would have pitted around the same time, but because when they all came in the pit, he was around 3 seconds back. So Chris gained a lot of time entering pit road. But look at this battle here around the 12th position. That's Mark Rondeau and Matthew Jockel there in the tow side by side. Just a really good opportunity to make some moves. Way to slide right in there. Matthew really needed to make sure he was able to clear him there. He did a good job clearing Jim Huth. So good job by him. But that was a really good battle in that front straight for 11th position.
Even though they're not running inside the top 10, these drivers are still battling hard. These two aren't running inside the top 20, and they're still battling quite hard. Ooh, that was a nice threading the needle action there. This is a good fight between, I believe this is Derrickson. Yeah, I believe this is between Derrickson, Tong, and Matson. So those drivers are battling very hard. That was a brilliant move there to kind of split the middle. Just had a massive run coming out the final corner and coming down the start-finish straightaway. So that was some good stuff. Meanwhile, the battle that we were following right outside the top 10 is continuing to heat up there. They're going side by side. That's very tense stuff there coming through turn 7. So right now, Huth currently running in P13. We're riding on board with him, looking back on the battle between many of the drivers farther behind. Lots of drivers going side by side. Right in this camera view. Thank you, Josh, for this wonderful shot here. But I think these drivers are going to feel a lot more racy here. The gaps are a bit big, at least towards the front, towards the back. I say that actually. Yeah, the gap has increased between Campbell and Braun. It's now 1.4 seconds. It was about 9/10 of a second, but a lap ago. So that gap has spread out a little bit. So I think these are the battles that we're going to have to keep our eyes on here in the final 10 minutes of this race.
Yeah, Rodney Campbell just put down the fastest lap of the session, 2:15.15, so he's pulling away. But this battle for the 27th spot, you take a look at Mike Matson at 23, and Derrickson and Tong right in front of him, and getting on this long straightaway go through the kink, and then we're going to try to maybe see if they make an overtake in Canada corner. But like I said earlier, if you're going to make the overtake, you got to make it stick. But he's not going to be able to have enough pace there as Matson. But with only 3/4 of the way through here, we still have 10 minutes of racing action. But good job getting into Canada corner and able to get up to the bumper of Derek Derrickson in that 24 car. So Mike's a little bit quicker on that last part of the track, but so yeah, just a little bit quicker on the last second.
Yeah, coming into the final 9 minutes of this race, not a whole lot of time left for these drivers to kind of negotiate with each other. I believe we're in the final few laps here soon. I'm trying to do the math here in my head. We're in the final 4 laps here, if I'm not mistaken. Final 5 laps for sure, but still plenty of time. 5 laps to go, really, at most tracks. Doesn't really feel like too much. 5 laps at Road America is a lot, because not only is it a very long course, about 4 miles long, but it's also a lot of overtaking opportunities, a lot of opportunities for a driver farther ahead to make some form of mistake. So there's still a lot that can change between now and the checkered flag. We're coming up on the 8-minute mark. We're following these two here. This is Lidback, my apologies. Looking back on Neville right behind. They're going to go side by side coming into the first corner here. Neville is going to try and get the move done down on the inside. It's going to be a battle of the last late breakers, and Neville gets a move done coming into turn 1. So now Neville moves up into P37 there. So it's kind of ridiculous to have these battles well farther behind us. I've never really commentated a race with so many cars, and with so many cars, there's been a lot of action throughout this race, and a lot of strategic racing as well. These drivers are kind of saving up their stuff. We've got the pit stops that those drivers just negotiated with, but despite that, these drivers are still racing hard. There's contact there between Derrickson there, and even more contact there with Derrickson and Matson coming through the carousel there. So some hard argy-bargy action between all of these drivers. They're battling coming through turn 8, battling coming through turn 9, being and banging with each other, and they're still fairly close together, not quite side by side yet, but I'm sure we might see a move here coming into Canada corner. Matson is closing, just not close enough to get the move done coming into Canada corner. So far, it's a fairly smooth sailing with these two. We'll see what their battle cracks up to be in the late stage of this race. Meanwhile, I think there's a change of position farther up the road between Gibson and Holmes there. So they're running in P7 and P8, so that's a battle right inside the top 10. But never mind that. This is close stuff. They're nearly making contact coming out of the final corner. So there's a lot of contact there very early on in this race, probably about 20 minutes ago at this point. A lot of drivers being and banging and rough each other up coming out of the final corner, and one driver getting spun hard into the outside wall. So thankfully for these two, that their battle did not end in a similar way.
Yeah, that's a nice thing about when you get a grid of 57 cars is you're always racing against somebody, and that always makes them fun. Here's Elsom trying to make a move on Baker, just not able to. Just didn't have a big enough run. It was a good job by Andrew to not just send it in the corner and wipe him out. A good driving by him for the trying to get up to the 14th place, but back to 24th. It's Fairburn trying to catch up to Peter Yerxa, and Fairburn is just having a good pace right now, and drives in a little bit deep, and noticed that he had to hit the brakes a little bit harder, kind of unsettle the car, but able to still keep on going. So Peter Yerkes has just got a lot of pressure. He wants to stay in that 23rd position, and Fairburn is coming up to him pretty quick.
Yeah, I think that's you gotta play the Jaws music, dun dun dun, just quickly closing in. It's at this point in the stints with these tires worn out a little bit and these fairly low running fuel tanks, I think you have a lot of drivers on very different strategies and different ideas of what they're going to do between now and the checkered flag. Some drivers are pushing. Certainly Bowers is pushing here, coming for a move going into turn 5 and gets a move done on Lidback there coming into turn 5. So you've got different drivers on different strategies. You've got some pushing. Certainly Bowers pushing the track limits there right after getting the move done on Lidback. It goes for a little bit of long mowing, but manages to keep it going there for now. We'll see. Hopefully he doesn't make another mistake like that. Grass on your tires is a bad thing to have, especially when they're about to hit the carousel here in a few moments time. So hopefully, fingers crossed for his sakes, he's having a fairly good drive. Fingers crossed for his sakes that he doesn't have another incident there with those dirty tires. Meanwhile, we've got some hard racing here with Huth trying to get a move done here going into turn 5. Very close. I don't believe they're actually side by side. Ooh, that was a bit of a pinch off there. Some blocking action there coming into turn 5, but all is fair in love and racing, and Huth stays in P13 for now, but I'm sure he's going to be a little bit pissed off after the way that he was raced by his competitor. So I think, I don't know, we'll see what happens here. We might see some drivers trying to get some revenge for something that happened. I think a lot of drivers have some frayed nerves. A lot of drivers having races that haven't gone exactly their way, so I think we might see some of these competitors all up and down the field try and push even more and claw for their positions. In the final few moments of this race, we're in the final 2 minutes. I believe we'll be taking the white flag here next time by.
Yeah, Matson put on a really good run, but I tell you what, I've been real impressed with the lead crews for a little bit. Just Rodney Campbell just putting on a clinic, running super fast times, 2:05.14. It's his quickest time, and the Breaking Bad racing car number 62, the Canadian, is just doing a really good job. And I want to give a big shout out to Chris Brown. He's been able to maintain and keep up. But the big shout out goes to Gregorato in 4th, 2:04.850, super fast time. And I think just a big props to him for putting that time on. Sitting in 4th and being the only driver in the 2:04 mark. That's something to be proud of there, Ron.
Yeah, that is a fantastic lap time. I'm just taking a look now. That is very close to his qualifying pace. So he sets a 2:04.8 in this race and was in a 2:04.5 in qualifying. So that's a very good lap there from him to do that. And meanwhile, Huth going for a little bit of lawn mowing action, some gravel running coming through turn 1. So unfortunately, that'll take him out of that fight there as he drops down farther behind. It's going to be basically impossible to close that gap here soon. Actually, the quote I said earlier about us being on the final lap, I apologize, that was incorrect. We'll be taking the white flag this time by. We're at 2 to go, and we're following Michael Patterson, currently running in P7. He is calling this battle with Lung right behind, so this is going to be close between these two. The gap right now is not a whole lot, about a half a second between those two. Only about 5 or 6 car lengths separating them currently. So we'll see if these drivers start to rough each other up a little bit. And we'll see if they could possibly catch up to Holmes if Holmes has some sort of mistake. Actually, I say that Holmes had a little bit of lawn mowing action coming wide through turn 8 there. So Holmes is possibly feeling the pressure. If he makes some sort of mistake, that'll be a 3-car fight. But this has been a battle that we've been following with Tong and Matterson all throughout the second stint of this race. They've been battling very hard, have swapped positions probably about 5 times at this point. So Tong right now feeling really racy, as is Donald Green, currently running in P30. We haven't seen too much of him in this race, and he's currently locked line of stern with a battle here with De Silva going into turn 5 and overshoots it quite badly and makes contact there. I believe that was I'm not sure who that was. I believe that was Eskridge there that they made contact with. So unfortunately for Green, a little bit unsafe of a rejoin there. Had to check up. The other drivers did, slowly approaching that incident. But that's some very hard racing. Some drivers with frayed nerves trying to get the most out of their races. And also seeing that checkered flag come, we're now the final minute of this race. That 40-minute barrier is coming up soon. I believe Rodney Campbell has actually taken the white flag this past time by. So this is the victory lap, you could call it, for Rodney Campbell right now. But it's not a comfortable victory lap. As you can see, that gap between him and Chris Braun has cratered quite significantly. I'm not sure. He might have made some kind of mistake because that gap now is less than half a second there. So Braun is going to have to try and push and give it everything he has. I think Canada Corner coming up is going to be his last real great shot of trying to grab the win, but we've got the lap car farther up ahead. Oh my god, that was extremely close. That could have ended in a disaster there for Braun. He literally gave a very big check up there to the car right up ahead, so thankfully for Braun, he manages to keep his car undamaged. Certainly probably had an accident in his trousers with how close that was, but right now he's extremely close to the back of Campbell right now. You can see he's closing up quite a lot, about to hit 150 miles an hour coming into Canada Corner. He's closing. Is he going to try and go for the move on the inside? He's going for the move around the outside coming into Canada Corner, but Rodney Campbell manages to hold that off for now. It looked like Braun was possibly going to try and get the move done on the exit of Canada Corner, but isn't close enough. We're going to have to see a send here coming into the final corner if Braun is going to try and take this win, but you can see the lap car getting involved in that as well. But Rodney Campbell gets a good exit coming out of this final corner. Ooh, he doesn't. It might be a low drag race between these two. Coming to the checkered flag, Campbell is trying to hold off in this position, and meanwhile we got Braun closing in. They're going to go side by side coming to the checkered flag. I believe it's going to be extremely close, but I believe it's Rodney Campbell taking the win in tonight's race. He takes a fairly dominant win. I'll take a look at my live timing screen, but that was extremely close between those two by the time the checkered flag came, and I just took a look to confirm, yes, it is Rodney Campbell taking the win from tonight's race. Chris Braun extremely close behind. The gap between those two was only about a half a tenth by the time they reached the checkered flag. So Chris Braun giving it everything he had, but it was too little too late there. And meanwhile, we've got some battling farther down, and I need to take a break to take a sip of water. That was a great finish to this race.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Chris Braun was coming and had an opportunity to try to get up to Rodney Campbell, and just
and that was that hard racing there. Fairburn gets spun, and thankfully, because of the gap there, manages to hold on to 19th, but has a very damaged Porsche there. He will try and crawl across the finish line. You can see the damage on the front end of that Porsche of his. That was a very clumsy incident there, coming out of the kink and going down the flat-out blast between the kink and Canada Corner. We're getting a replay here to see what exactly went on. I was taking a look at my glass of water there, and just a little bit of nudging there, and sadly for Fairburn, it ends in total disaster. He was running in 17th, loses 2 positions because of that incident, and also loses quite a lot of front bumper there, so that's a hard impact there for Fairburn. We're looking at the full speed replay here. A little bit of nudging here, and just, ooh, yeah, that is not a section of the course where you want to have any sort of issue. Very tight walls, or little runoff to speak of, and sadly for Fairburn, it ends in disaster, so he runs off this race in 19th. Chris Brown finishes in P2. That was a dramatic finish between those two, and that was a pretty good race, all things considered. There's some low moments here and there, but still, that was some epic racing with an epic finish, and hopefully the other viewers watching here on Apex Racing TV enjoyed it just as much as me, Avery, and Josh have.
Yeah, it was such a great race to call. I tell you what, man, 57 cars at any track is a lot. But you come to Road America, it's a good long track, but here in the States, a lot of tracks are narrow. But I think overall, really good race. I think coming into, you don't know really what to expect, but this definitely blew my expectations away. And big shout out to Rodney Campbell though for getting that win and holding off a hard charging Chris Braun at the end.
Yeah, that was an absolutely dominant drive, and it could have ended in an absolute disaster if that move got done. That would have been a very upset performance there. I'm sure we would have had a very upset Rodney Campbell after that. So, yeah, the other drivers are parading around the other track and slowly pulling into the pits. We're riding on board with Chris Braun. And I'm not sure if we could get a replay to see the side-by-side battling that those two had coming to the checkered flag. That was some great camera work seeing it live, but I would like to see the shot there as they approached the start-finish line, because that was a beautiful battle between those two, and it ended as close as you could get. We'll get the results here in the not-too-distant future to see the gap, the and gap there, but you can see, yeah, whew, yeah, it's that was a beautiful finish there. That was one of the. It's been a great day of very close finishes. We had some close finishes in the BRSCC British Mazda Winter Cup earlier today, where I believe the gap was about 37 thousandths of a second by the checkered flag, and we have another very close finish here with the Sunset Cruise series. So that was a fantastic debut for that series, for this series on Apex Racing TV. Fingers crossed that everyone watching wherever you are across the world, watching this broadcast here on Apex Racing TV, fingers crossed you enjoyed it too. I think we're about to get the results here soon, and my vocal cords are feeling the burn from this. I woke up with a sore throat today, and I believe that was the practice results there. Here's the race results here, and it's Rodney Campbell taking a win just barely. You can see the gap there ended up being 0.047 of a second between Rodney Campbell and Chris Braun. Absolutely brilliant stuff there. And then Chad Dick finishing a very distant P3, about 10 seconds separating those few by the time the checkered flag came out. And that's Gregato, who, despite finishing in P4 just off the podium, scored that very dominant fastest lap win. So good for him. I believe he picks up a bonus point for that. So he finishes in P4. And then it's Chapman finishing in 5th, had a fairly quiet race, and brings it home in a very good P5 for him. And then it's Adam Zink in P6, Gibson in P7, Lung in P8, Rondow in P9. That's Furr in the 10th position, finishing about 40 seconds behind. And then it's Elmson, Sachs, Lacombe, Jokel, another Jokel, Matthew Jokel, and Kevin Jokel finishing line astern in P14 and P15. Then it's Terrence Tong finishing in P16, Derrickson in P17. That's Mike Matson rounding out your field in 18th, and that's De Silva in 19th, and then Eskridge rounding out your top 20. I'll pass it off to you, Avery, because I need to take a break.
I think we can have you keep going. I'm just kidding. Rex Dorilla in 21st, Johan Nye, Tamer Elbaga, Rob Neville, who had a good recoup after his incident, Scott Bowers, David Glenn, Danon Fairburn, and Jason Finch up to 28th. And then 29th place, we're looking at Ken Eskridge. And then 30th, Rex, 29, Brett Holmes, and Mike Patterson, Jim Huth, Joachim Baker, Lee Binkley, Cam Frick, Russell, and then Peter Yerksa, who had a good run towards the end, Alex Lidbeck, and then Art Schwartz is in 38th. 39th place goes to David Sentel, Lisa Eckridge in 40th, then Jeremy Main, Jack Stevenson, Curtis Crummell, Chad Cason, Guillermo Mungoy in 45th, Donald Dreen, Casey McDonald, always good to have someone share my last name, Gabriel Albano in 48th. 49th, Carl Bucari, Peter Coomer in 50th, Ward Preston, Patrick Gill, Richard Franco, Lyle Iddy, Jared Roadheaver, James Franzik, and then in 57th place, our good friend from the Flying Lion Racing, the number 218, JR Gregory.
I think we said that we were going to bully him, but that was a very unfortunate incident for his race 10 only 3 corners in. So I give commiserations to our old buddy there, JR, and fingers crossed he doesn't sulk too badly on the Radical broadcast here tomorrow on Apex. And speaking of, we've got a whole lot of racing action coming up here on Apex Racing TV. I believe the IRL GT3 trophy will be returning, so if you're in the mood for some GT3 action here on Apex Racing TV, you know where to come here tomorrow. That'll be around 2:30 Eastern, so that'll be a very good race there. We had a fantastic season 6 of the IRL GT3 trophy. That was a pleasure to commentate with my good buddy Sam Fitzpatrick there. And then elsewhere on Apex, we've got some Weekend Warriors stuff coming up between the Formula Ford Weekend Warriors and the Spec Racer Ford Weekend Warriors. They'll be running at this exact same track, Road America, for I believe their season finales. So that will be some good racing action there. I've gotten the privilege to commentate on both of those series as well, and it produces some pretty good racing. And as I said earlier, we've got the other Rickman Tech Sports Car Series coming up. That will be round 8 of their season at Watkins Glen. That will be coming up at 8 p.m. Eastern on December the 4th here on Apex Racing TV. And then as I mentioned, as I was talking about JR earlier, the other Radical Racing Challenge will cap their season off here for season 4 of 2023 at the Nordschleife. That'll be a pretty good race. I know our producer Josh has done some races in the Radicals at the Nordschleife, and he hasn't had some very pleasant experiences there. Has been taken to have a few incidents in that series. So that's a racing action that we have coming up here on Apex Racing TV, and it'll be pretty much the exact same from now until the ball drops and 2024 graces us here in about a month's time. It's the end of November. In a few hours' time, it will be December. Personally, I think it's the best month of the year, and not just because it has Christmas and my birthday. So we've got a whole lot of racing action coming up here on Apex Racing TV, and fingers crossed that starting in 2024, the Sunset Cruise Series will return and we can cover the entirety of Season 3, because this was a privilege to commentate this series. I can't speak for you, Avery. I'll ask you your brief thoughts on commentating this race, but I know, speaking for myself, it was a joy commentating this race.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, not many series can have 57 cars show up on a night, and then they did it, and they provided a really good race. And just once again, congratulations to Rodney Campbell for taking home the win, and congratulations to Chris Braun and Chad Dick that rounded out the podium. But yeah, stellar job, well-ran group, well-ran league, and just a tremendous race. They're going to be back for their final race of the season at Sebring. Won't be here on Apex, but still take a look at their website, look at their results, keep an eye on how drivers are doing. Maybe somebody in the race, in the series, but fantastic race.
Yeah, that was absolutely fantastic. It was a privilege to commentate with you here, Avery, and it was a privilege to commentate this series, and fingers crossed that returns here. So we give our congratulations to our podium finishers here tonight, Rodney Campbell, Chris Braun, and Chad Dick, your podium finishers from tonight. We also give our thanks to the Porsche Club of America, who put on these fantastic races, and Princess Cruises, who sponsor it and are the people who operate the other cruise. That a lucky driver from this series will receive in about a week's time once the season rounds off in Sebring. As you said, despite it not being covered on Apex, you can check out everything on Porsche Club of America's website. I believe it's pca.com if I'm not mistaken, so you can check out all the information there about this series. And I'm sure, we won't be able to see it, unfortunately, but I think Sebring always lends itself to some good GT racing, so I'm sure it'll be a fantastic race to round off a very good season of racing action. And if this season was any indication, this series is filled with racing action, and fingers crossed that returns here on Apex Racing TV in 2024. So that'll do it for this broadcast here on Apex Racing TV. It's been a wonderful race, and it's been a privilege commentating this series, and if it's a one-off here on Apex Racing TV and never returns, I was happy to be a part of it here. So for myself, Ron Mullins, Avery McDonald joining me in the commentary booth, and Joshua Wilkie working all the cameras in the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching, and we hope to see you wherever it is in the not too distant future. Have a great rest of your night.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.